true cash buyer places an offer to purchase a property at full price, does not win the contract. A true cash offer versus a cash-like offer, and there's a very big difference.
You're always weighing the balance as a seller on what's the better option.
Is cash still king in 2022? Welcome, Solid Source. It's Derek Varnadoe here.
And I'm Dalianas, and we're here to discuss, is cash still king in 2022?
We are, and let me give you an example first to kind of set the scene as we dive into this topic. So, true cash buyer places an offer to purchase a property at full price, does not win the contract. So a conventional offer actually does win the contract with an appraisal gap clause agreeing to pay up to $50,000 difference. So one thing that we have seen over the past couple of years, Demo, is that cash certainly is king. It's still desirable, right? But it's not always king. So it may not always be what a seller is going to accept. And that's very different than what we've seen years ago, for sure.
Right. So there's definitely terms that you're looking at, maybe weighing the options of cash, a shorter due diligence or no due diligence, and maybe in this market, even a loan might have no due diligence, right? So you're always weighing the balance as a seller on what's the better option. And as the agent, right, representing that seller, you want to be able to bring if it's a cash offer, hey, it's great, it's a cash offer, but here is what we have to do to be able to accept a cash offer. They may ask for certain things that maybe a loan would not ask for.
Absolutely. And I think that you hit on some great points, but a true cash offer versus a cash-like offer, and there's a very big difference. So true cash offer, a buyer who truly has the cash right away, proof of funds, right? A cash-like offer, meaning a buyer who simply waived all their contingencies, meaning they don't include the financing exhibit, or they include it, but they don't have a financing contingency. They don't have an appraisal contingency. So there is a big difference. And so that's kind of what we have seen come into play over the past couple of years.
Certainly. So if you were advising an agent who receives multiple offers, one's a cash offer, less than maybe the price, or at least less than the other purchase price offer of another offer that has a loan, and it is a true cash versus someone with a loan. Do we have suggestions of weighing those options, or at least presenting that to the seller?
It is a good idea, in my experience and in my opinion, to negotiate with the cash buyer first. And because that cash buyer may be willing to come up on their offer, meet or beat those other offers that are stronger. Because here's the thing, to a seller, it's all cash at closing for them, whether the buyer's truly paying with their own cash or maybe the lender's cash, right? So if that cash buyer realizes that there's another contract, another offer that we've received that's for more, they, in a lot of cases, are willing to go ahead and improve their offer. Maybe they're not, but certainly worth a try.
So what can a buyer do who is not a cash offer? What can they do to strengthen their side if they are going against apples to apples price, but with a true cash offer, right? So they have a loan, they're going against an all cash offer, same price. They don't know that maybe in the negotiations, but it is. What can they do to strengthen their side?
That's a good question. I think it's important for us to understand why a cash buyer, a true cash buyer, would be considered more favorably by the seller.
Good point.
And that is because not only does the contract not have those, typically not going to have an appraisal contingency, although it could. We'll talk about the cash exhibit as well. But they don't have those hurdles to get through. There's no lender that has to approve anything. There's probably not going to be an appraiser that's going to come into play. So those hurdles are eliminated. You may still have the due diligence period, probably still will. Georgia's buyer beware, super important to have that. But you don't have to worry about those. And you can close sooner. Normally you can close in 2 weeks or so. A cash-like buyer, pre-approval, being approved up front is super important. The shorter your contingencies can be, maybe you choose to not have the financing contingency and you go with a short appraisal contingency and you pay for a rush appraisal, which can typically be done in a couple of weeks. maybe you do use the appraisal gap clause. Maybe it's not 50,000, maybe it's 10,000 or 5,000. Those are going to help to strengthen your offer for sure.
Excellent. So what about if you are representing a cash buyer? What do you need to put in place or make sure that they sign inside of that contract or have outside of the contract if there's something else in addition, proof of funds, that type of thing? What do they need to look out for as an agent when they are placing a true all cash offer or to make it from a cash like to an all cash?
A true cash buyer will have those proof of funds. And so may sound silly, may sound super basic, but having that proof of funds is really important for not only the buyer's agent, but also the seller's agent.
Mm-hmm.
Now, GAR does have an all-cash exhibit. Now, the great thing about that exhibit for both a buyer or for a buyer is you can select a certain box and you can have an appraisal contingency because maybe not in the market we're currently in, but certainly in other markets, buyers who are cash still want to have an appraisal done. They don't want to overpay for the property either.
Right.
Maybe they want to reserve the right to get a loan because one of the cool things about GAR's cash exhibit is that very top section, you can select whether you do or do not have the right to seek financing to purchase the property. For a seller, there's an option to check that you shall not, which eliminates the 8-day unilateral extension. A lot of people don't know that, but I would say it's more important if you're with a seller to get that cash exhibit, because if someone sends you an offer and there's no contingencies there, that should raise some questions. Where are the proof of funds or where is the pre-approval? But if it's true cash, if I'm with the seller, I really want that cash exhibit. I want it to be marked that they don't have the right to get a loan. And probably no appraisal contingency, especially right now.
Right. Anything else as a listing agent, kind of as we've transitioned into that a listing agent should look out for along with that? Now, and I guess more along the lines of proof of funds. What are some acceptable forms of that or something that you should look out for or ask if you haven't received those proof of funds, but they said they're a cash offer?
Right. Normally, proof of funds is going to be just a bank statement. It may be in the individual name. If they're purchasing as an LLC or an entity, it may be in that name. And certainly, they're going to redact personal information and account numbers. That's all pretty standard. You could always call and speak with the representative at the bank that issued the proof of funds letter, certainly. And going back to the cash exhibit, though, there is a section also on that exhibit that has a buyer promising they will provide proof of funds within so many days from the binding agreement. Now, as a listing agent, as a seller, you really want to have that proof of funds up front, but it also identifies acceptable forms of the proof of funds and at least provides a remedy, a pathway to a solution if it's not provided.
So pretty much like most GAR forms, if we read through there, we're probably going to have a really good idea of what's on there, what's required on both sides. So that's the good thing about the GAR contracts, right?
It is the good thing about the GAR contract, and not harping on the cash exhibit, but just to kind of emphasize one more time why it's so important if you are with a seller. I've certainly talked to many agents who have had sellers who have accepted contracts where there was no financing exhibit, no cash exhibit. They really didn't necessarily care in the beginning, right? Everything's good when it's good in the beginning, if it was going to be a true cash offer or a cash-like offer. And without the cash exhibit, technically, the buyer still could get a loan. And that may not seem like a big deal because, again, isn't it all going to be cash-like for the seller at closing? But maybe there's a delay, and maybe they have a legitimate reason to use that 8-day extension. And if you look closely at the GAR contract, when it talks about the 8-day extension, it says including in all cash transactions. And that's why. So unless you have that cash exhibit and you specifically mark the box that says they do not have the right to get a loan and to have an 8-day extension, then they technically have it.
Wow. That's great info, Derek. Anything else related to cash-like or cash offers and how buyers and sellers or agents, more importantly, may be able to protect their clients?
Well, one thing I would just stress is that most offers are not cash. So don't let that intimidate you. We certainly are experiencing a market where a lot of buyers are willing to make cash-like offers or very competitive offers where they have waived contingencies. Typically, though, they keep an appraisal contingency. They'll keep that appraisal gap clause in there. So conventional loan certainly is going to be more popular right now for sellers versus FHA and VA just because of the appraisals and then the amendatory clause, the appraisal contingency they have. But don't feel intimidated. Just know that most offers are not truly cash. And I would just keep all this in mind so you can make the strongest offer possible, or at least provide the best recommendations to a buyer, and they can make an informed decision.
Certainly. So, summary of the hour: is cash still king in 2022? What's your opinion?
It all depends. I think yes. I think that cash is evergreen, right? I think cash is always going to be king, but not in every situation. Every seller's different. Every deal's different. And in the example that I gave earlier, real example that came in, it may not be for that particular seller. You've overpriced the house, maybe on purpose a little bit, or you've chosen to take an offer that's overpriced because they're willing to pay the difference. And for most sellers, they are going to be looking at the bottom line.
Great info, Derek. Well, you've heard it here. We'd love to know your answer to, is cash still king in 2022? Leave a comment for us and subscribe to our channel. Thank you. Thanks, Derek.